You buy Bitcoin, you hold it for more than 4 years, Joe. That's my advice to everybody.
Fair to say you simply flooded the system with money.
Yes, we did. That's another way to think about it.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally.
I'm very bullish on the long-term viability of Bitcoin.
I was going to say, did that surprise you?
That surprised me how much that's gone up.
Hey Internet, welcome back to another episode of New Foundations, the podcast brought to you by Acropolis, the Bitcoin Treasury company. This week, I'm joined by Glenn Cameron, our Chief Investment Officer, and Brad Meyers. He's a partner over at Early Riders. We're missing Chase this week, unfortunately, but fortunately, he had his first baby on Saturday. So shout out to Chase and congratulations to him and his wife. But very excited to have Dom here, Dom Bei. He's a fireman, founder of Proof of Workforce, which is working with unions and pensions on Bitcoin adoption, specifically firefighters. So looking forward to chatting about that. But Dom, welcome.
Mason, thanks for having me, and Glenn and Brad. Great to be on, and excited to talk some Bitcoin as always, you know?
It's always great talking Bitcoin. I think you're very well known in the Bitcoin community, but perhaps for people that listen to this podcast that are a little bit more focused on Bitcoin treasuries and the corporate side of it, could you just give a little bit of a background on yourself and then what brought you to Bitcoin?
Yeah, so been a firefighter for 15 years, coming on 16 years. First was introduced to Bitcoin. Well, you know, there's the first introduced to Bitcoin, the story we all have where, you know, we just couldn't figure it out. And that's a very painful story, like many of us have. But then the story where I kind of figured it out was 2017. Really started taking a look into Bitcoin. I served as a elected labor leader for our union board for just over 10 years. I was the president of the Santa Monica Firefighters Union for 4 years. And after finishing that, I really started looking at the intersection of Bitcoin, workers and wage earners, labor unions, pension funds, etc. And as I kind of wrote and explored that space, just, you know, more parallels and important aspects started emerging. I ended up working with the Santa Monica Firefighters to help them become the first union in the United States, possibly the world, to hold Bitcoin on the balance sheet in self-custody. I created Proof of Workforce, which is a 501c4 nonprofit, which exists to provide education and Bitcoin initiatives to workers, unions, pensions, now municipalities, and we're working with some states. And we do that at no cost. Our goal is to make sure that workers find out about Bitcoin, wage earners learn about Bitcoin, and that, you know, the wage earners and workers of the world don't get left behind by what we know to be, you know, a very successful run ahead for Bitcoin. So that's what I do now. I'm the lead coordinator for the Santa Monica Bitcoin office. You know, I could go. I got a lot of random stuff. I can't sit still, so I do a lot of stuff. You know, proof of work is the mantra. So, yeah.
So tell us what it is about Bitcoin that can help union members. Like, what is it about the uniqueness of Bitcoin that you're trying to achieve when you're talking to unions?
I'm a big history guy. I was a history major in college. The ethos of unions has a lot of parallels, right? I love looking at old union art, you know, the international workers of the world, solidarity, fighting the system, right? Big corporate interests trying to extract wealth from your everyday workers a little bit at a time without them knowing, right? And then you have Bitcoin that comes along with the Genesis block saying, you know, Chancellor bails another bailout, bails out, you know, Wall Street again. And this ethos of like, hey, here's something where your wealth can't be extracted. And a lot of the parallels with Bitcoin, proof of work, you know, like the concept of being decentralized, which even though there's a lot of bigger unions now, really unions are just a bunch of decentralized kind of groups of workers that bind together to try to get a better deal or better situation. So tons of values in common. And really, as this system accelerates, and we know that money supply is accelerating at a rapid pace, regardless of who is in power in the government, workers are just the easiest target to have wealth extracted by bits and pieces here and there. We saw it in the pension funds after the financial crisis were pillaged pretty badly, and many have never recovered. And so, yeah, just there's tons of values in common with Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is a valuable tool for the wage earner to leave something for, their next of kin or the legacy members, whoever comes on next, and preserve that value.
And are you just kind of going to unions and offering your services to educate their members, or are you kind of involved in the operationalization of that, like giving them, the actual access to the Bitcoin itself? I'm kind of interested in that.
Yeah, so we were reaching out to a ton of unions via, any route possible. Now, due to some pivots and a lot of factors, right? The ETF was a big one last January. This new administration is signaling that they're much more supportive of, digital assets and Bitcoin. Even though we'd like for them to just focus on Bitcoin and ditch the rest of the other trillion digital assets, right? They're gonna do what they're gonna do. But we get hit up a lot now. Unions call us, and so what we provide is a pretty simple get off zero initiative that can be conformed to whatever union, whatever they want to do. For example, Santa Monica, when we first started, we did an initiative that was $1 per member. The ETFs weren't even approved yet. There was still a lot of misinformation. The media was overwhelmingly negative on Bitcoin. Every article that you saw, this thing is still, regardless of what people say, their number one source of information. And there's so much out there that often they don't look too deeply in stuff. So the majority of the world learns about Bitcoin through this device. And we know the headlines they see through this device are guy loses passcode to billions of dollars. FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried frauds $3 billion lost. Scammers. Jamie Dimon says it's only for criminals. So they look at these things and they're brainwashed over and over. So we created an initiative that really was built to neutralize fears and get people to take a first step into Bitcoin, but learn about it. Nowadays, unions might be past that. I get a call from a lot of unions that go, hey, we're not interested in like $1 per member. We want to get like a meaningful position. All right. If your members are ready for that, great. So we can build these initiatives. We help them from every step of the process, from messaging, talking to the board of directors, getting rank and file membership involved in the approval process, setting up committees to continue have ongoing conversations, execution of the actual purchase of Bitcoin. We don't exclusively partner with any one, entity, but we educate them to go, hey, what are you thinking? If a union board member calls me and goes, Dom, what exchange should I buy my Bitcoin on? I tell him, hey, you guys aren't ready to buy Bitcoin yet. Let's keep working. Let's keep educating, because you should not be coming to me asking me for that with no information. More, you should be calling me saying, hey, I've looked at this exchange, I like this about it. Let's have a meaningful conversation about facts. So, yeah, and then we help with the custody. If they need help getting in touch with people, we leverage our connections in the network to help them be successful. We do press release stuff to make sure that their community gets on board, and ongoing education and future initiatives from them. So really, I tell unions, we charge $0. We sell zero product. I talk to them. We have nothing to sell. If they don't want to get off zero, I'm happy, because in 10 years, I'll lay my head on the pillow knowing I did everything I possibly could to onboard workers and wage earners and unions onto this incredible thing. But if they do decide to take this step, we have got their back every step of the way. And we've gone through this with 7, 8 different unions with more on the way. So, these aren't like idea templates. These are working templates that have actually gone through the paces, and most have been passed at over like an 85% majority. So, that's kind of what we do with the unions and the resources we provide.
Embrace the future of corporate finance with Acropolis, your strategic partner for a Bitcoin Treasury strategy. We're the experts your business needs. Acropolis offers trusted Bitcoin advisory. We provide you with an outsourced Bitcoin strategy officer, world-class research, and a creative financing team, and more, so you can navigate Bitcoin's market with confidence and acumen. Best-in-class custody with multi-institution custody. Eliminate the risk of loss while maintaining full control of real Bitcoin. Acropolis exclusively uses multi-institution custody as the safest and easiest way for businesses to hold Bitcoin. Bitcoin-only solutions. The Acropolis platform is designed for businesses of all sizes to seamlessly manage their Bitcoin treasury, and we focus solely on Bitcoin to offer you the most specialized services available. Adding Bitcoin to your balance sheet is just the beginning. With Acropolis, you're not just adopting Bitcoin, you're mastering its strategic use to create and maintain value for generations. Take the first step and start your corporate Bitcoin journey with Acropolis. Book your free consultation today at acropolistreasury.com/book and start implementing our proven strategies within days.
Dom, I think it's a really great point, and I think when you look at the products and services that exist out there within the Bitcoin ecosystem, there's such a breadth of them when it comes to, again, the trade-offs of everything. Again, you mentioned some people coming to you saying, hey, we're ready to go buy Bitcoin on an exchange. Well, for us who've been around long enough, we know the inherent risks of that just in its own right. There's additional, again, even just the custody component, like further downstream of that, whether it's self-custody, whether it's collaborative custody, whether you're trusting a qualified custodian. But I think all of those obstacles, it sounds like, are things that you kind of have to go through when you're talking to these, various unions and leaders who are ultimately going to be making or proposing a vote on some investment decisions on behalf of their members. So you said about 85% pass yes, but talk to us a little bit more maybe about the interconnectivity of where the pushback does come from, maybe even just outside of, maybe the technical understandings of how do they, figure out this asset.
So here's a good model that I use to break down. And again, you talk about all the different people in the space. I was a union president. I used to get hit up all the time. Hey, we want to make a presentation. You're like, okay, dude, what are you selling? What's the pitch? You're trying to get us on board. We're busy. We have tons of issues of our own. So that's something to overcome. And that's why I created a nonprofit format, because at the time, and it's getting there, but Bitcoin wasn't ready to be adopted in a profit model, because the minute you come and say, hey, I'm selling a product and I financially benefit from this, they're already writing off Bitcoin. Now that's just another reason my approach is education based as just a participant in the ecosystem. Where's the pushback come from? Well, in governance, I've found that on any given issue, you have, let's say like a working foundation of 100% of your members, whether it's residents of a city, whether it's members of a union, whether it's the nation as a whole, 80% are in the middle, and they don't really give a shit about anything at all. I mean, maybe that's a grotesque, overstatement. They care, but they're not really honing in onto, any given topic unless it interests them. So, if their interest is, they're really into the coffee at the union house and a coffee measure comes up, they're going to be like, all right, I'm interested on this. I'm going to pay attention. But 80% in the middle on any given topic are not going to care. Then you have 10% that are probably going to land for, and 10% that are going to be vehemently opposed, whether it's on the merit of that or because they just are like, I'm opposed. No to everything. We know who these folks are. Cool. How do you keep the 80% from getting swayed one way or the other based on emotion instead of fact? Well, you have to neutralize the fears. So if you can imagine a union, especially before the ETF, if we were to propose, putting half of all the money they have saved for their whole organization for the last 10 years into Bitcoin, if you're in that 80% that don't really care, who do you think you're going to listen more to, the positive folks or the people that are like, dude, are we crazy? You're going to put this money into this like whimsical, non-intrinsically backed thing where people lose stuff. And because there's an emotional attachment to that fund, that 80% is going to be swayed. Your measure is going to fail. If you can neutralize the fear, like we've done with the $1 per member, now imagine Glenn and Mason are in the middle, and Brad, you're for, and I'm super negative against. And we're going to all do $1 per member into Bitcoin. And Brad says, this is really cool. I don't know. I think Bitcoin's cool. It'd be fun to learn about this. It's very forward looking. This is awesome. And I go, Glenn, Mason, you got to come in here. Listen, these guys are crazy. They're going to lose all of our money. This is a huge mistake. Like this it's only for criminals. This thing is a Ponzi scheme. And Glenn and Mason are like, Dom, you seem to be overreacting a little bit. We're talking about, if I misread, I'm not sure I misread. This is $1 per member, right? So are you really approaching me tripping out about $100? It flips the script, and now they're going to ask me, why are you so against it? And they're going to actually be a little more willing to learn. I always use the example of, if we're in a conference room and I set a fire in the corner, do you think people in the conference are going to be calmly learning and go, oh, it's very interesting? No, they're going to be screaming, yelling their head off, running for the door, trampling on each other. So you have to set that table for that environment. And I don't care whether that's for a union, a city, a state, or a nation. You have to set that table and make it to where folks are willing to learn and understand something fact-based.
Yeah, I also think like based upon just again, the types of unions that in the activities and work that they do, it is very scoreboard based. So again, like you go again, you're doing, is a fire out or is it contained? Again, there's a bit of a measure on that, and so I think again, being able to have at least a mark to market scoreboard of how something is performing is probably very real, and also ossifies again whether or not something is working or not for a lot of the individuals.
Yeah, I'll tell you a very, very quick story. When the firefighters, when Santa Monica did their $1 per member measure and went into self-custody, we made history. It was over the weekend. The morning after, the SEC sued Coinbase and Binance. Remember, the lawsuit came out. Well, I had members, because we did a very well-articulated and thought-out measure that the members all voted on, which we didn't have to do for $1 per member. It was well within the purview of the board to just execute on that. Members were coming in that morning being like, hey, Dom, I saw this thing about a lawsuit against Coinbase and Binance, but I don't think that really impacts us because we have Bitcoin in self-custody, right? I'm like, thank you, God. This is amazing. On a morning where people should be coming in negative because all these media outlets are harping on this story saying, like, we told you it was a scam. They're coming in calm, being like, hey, what an amazing first lesson as an organization to hold something in self-custody and see that the two biggest exchanges are being sued. I mean, we know now what we kind of thought then, that, hey, that was all, an effort to prep the landing strip for the ETFs and get a grasp on some of the loose aspects of the exchanges. But the public doesn't know the intricacy of those details. And so, yeah, that's just an example of why. Imagine if we had bought half of our entire savings in Bitcoin. Members don't really know, and they're coming in, I want to call a special meeting. We're out of this thing, man. I told you guys, these guys are maniacs. They're out of their mind. We need to call emergency meeting and get out of this, right? So you have to set that table. States that are looking at the strategic reserve, not to jump too far ahead, they're going to have to do the same, because show me a state that throws Bitcoin in a strategic reserve and then we have a major dip or some controversy, and I'll show you heads will roll, man. They will roll, because if you look behind you and the people that make up your entity or institution aren't behind the long-term play, they are coming for you. It's just a tool for them. So
Man, there's a lot of overlap here as to what we're doing at Acropolis, what we talk about every week on this podcast in terms of the importance of owning real Bitcoin in self custody, all the important or all the effort that we put into education. But curious what you would say to someone about the benefits of owning spot Bitcoin that you can verify on a block explorer versus something like an ETF, because I think the common phrase back to you would be like, oh, why don't we just own the ETF? So what would your answer be to that?
Start with Bitcoin the way it was intended to be used. And I'm not an expert, so I can't say with, this is just my interpretation, but I interpret Bitcoin as being created to limit third-party risk and to take control and sovereignty over your own financial future and destiny. And we all remember that moment. Many of us had that moment. The first time I ever put any amount of Bitcoin into self-custody on like a hardware device, something changed with me. I just felt different. I felt like, wow, here's this thing and I get it. Like I'm responsible for the keys and I'm responsible to be a custodian. But if the banks all shut down, I have what I have, which is my claim to an amount of Bitcoin on the ledger. And I can go anywhere in the world where I can verify that and utilize it with my seed phrase. It was a special thing. I would tell organizations, don't just gloss over that for convenience. You're not using the tool as it was made to be used. Of course, we know that organizations and structures potentially benefit from a better fit, like using a custodian, especially when you're talking about large sums of money. I'm not sitting here saying, some national union should hold $10 million on a piece of paper in a desk drawer somewhere. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying you can still learn it. Even as an organization, even a pension fund could take a very small allocation. They could take $1,000 of funds and explore building in-house self-custody within their organization. And the risk would be very minimal because losing that funds or finding out they can't do it or whatever it is, it's negligible. So that would be number one. Number two, we're always going to have this fine line between self-custody and a custodian, and custodians will push that fine line as close as possible to still having you keep custody, but somewhere there's always a line where there's third-party risk, even if it's minimal, and then there's no third-party risk, or close to none, because even if you have it in self-custody, right, your third-party risk could be your neighbor. I don't know. But ultimately, again, I think using Bitcoin as it was intended has value. Even if you move to hold something like an ETF in the future, don't skip that. And if you have to hold it in a format that uses a custodian, then while you do that, explore how you could be a custodian, because I remember when BlackRock had a real estate deal with CalPERS, the largest pension in the United States, where CalPERS got smoked for $500 million for a housing project in New York City in like 2004. I think it was called the Stuyvesant project, or the Stuyvesant real estate. So BlackRock will not hesitate to, protect their interests overall if something happens or goes wrong. Don't ever mistake BlackRock for your friendly custodian. I get it. It's in their best interest to be a good, custodian of funds and not lose money, but they've done it before, and groups have gotten smoked on that. So, I think that's really important to like be comfortable with self-custody, even if you end up holding an ETF or joint custodial model.
So I don't know how much you can share. I mean, obviously, we don't want you doxing anybody who doesn't want, to be public about anything. But I mean, so you mentioned you worked with 8 trade unions, and I'm just curious, like, so what's your kind of the base case study or the most interesting story you can tell us about, those people that you've worked with, like, just anything you can share that you think the audience might find interesting about what you've done with one of them? They're
all different. They're all unique. They're all a great experience. I think one of my favorite to dates is the recent work we did in Kenya. And so I went to the Africa Bitcoin conference, and anytime I travel to a conference, I always try to connect with like a local work group. So I went to the fire station in Nairobi, downtown Nairobi, on foot because the traffic getting in was tough. So we're walking on foot, and I had someone that I had met bringing me through, and so that was a trip. We're walking through under freeways and stuff in Nairobi, and you have a moment where you're like, where am I? How did Bitcoin get me here? You know, and we get to the fire station, and look, I'll tell you a secret. Firefighters, they're busy, they're tired, they work a lot. And when visitors come, I hate when firefighters visit the fire station. I'm like, dude, just enjoy your vacation. Don't come visit me at work. So I try to be mindful of that and not like overwhelm them. And so I just kind of was like talking a little bit with them, and they were like, why are you here? And I told them about the Bitcoin conference and told them about my work. And they were like, hey, well, the head of the union for the firefighters for all of Kenya, he happens to have his office here. I'm like, whoa, okay, cool. So we sit down and talk, and I let him know, we have a Get Off Zero initiative for like domestic U.S. unions, and then we have a Get Off Zero initiative for global unions. That's more of like donation based. So I said, hey, sometimes what we do for these unions globally is, because look, Nairobi Fire Department, right? It's not the same as Santa Monica. There's like 15 to 20 guys sleeping in the same quarters. They're not funded well at all there, and they're scrapping to make ends meet. And so to ask them to put what very little money they have into Bitcoin, I mean, that's a tall ask. So we ended up raising some sats from the conference, and I said, here's what we do. Sometimes we help unions just get off zero, and we fundraise and stuff like that, and talking to them, hearing about their problems and what they were dealing with engagement. I said, I think this could be a good experience for you guys. So they were in, we got them off zero. And then we had the day after where I had to teach them, we taught them self-custody. And for me, it's just, here's like a 65-year-old and 67-year-old lifetime firefighter out of Nairobi. And we're sitting there with, I also got some local folks from Kenya involved that work in Bitcoin out there, and they were helping because I wanted them to have some good contacts when I leave. And we're sitting there for 3 hours helping them set up a wallet. And it takes as long as you would expect it to take and then some. And we're working on like how to track. We're just making a simple wallet. And after, I'll never forget, we talk about that change. When we were done, it took us like 4 hours. And we were done. But like when they stood up to leave, it was like, yes, sir, we have some funds of ours here that we hold, and that's ours, and like to see that for me was so powerful, because here's a group that just really lacks a lot of power in the infrastructure, and unions aren't as strong abroad, and they're just trying to like take care of members, and they only have like 50% engagement with people that are actually part of the union. And now they have this tool. And that same feeling that I got when I went to sleep from putting in self-custody, halfway around the world, they had that same feeling. And it's like, boom, there it is. And I just had this moment where I was like, holy shit, that was so powerful to see the difference in these guys walk in and then leave with a wallet that they have the seed phrase to. And, no, it can't be taken from them. The Nairobi government can't take it from them. They can't freeze the assets. They can't seize it. They can't inflate it. They can't dilute it. They can't, and just seeing the stature change, that to me is priceless. So I think that was like one of my best orange pilling experiences, just because of how hard it was, but how being able to watch that whole process, front and center.
Yeah, awesome. Especially in a country like that with such a weak currency, right? I mean, with Bitcoin where it is now, they must be pretty chuffed have access to a tool like Bitcoin.
And again, we know this this amazing thing, the Bitcoin network. It has, tremendous facets beyond just the digital asset side. It gets people excited. They called me afterward and said, "Hey, we put out this PR piece with the conference, and Bitcoin Magazine covered it too." And they're like, "Hey, we had members calling that said they want to sign up as members. They want to belong to the union and pay dues now because they're excited that they think we're going to be the bee's knees in the future." And I'm like, "Great, that's an amazing thing. Harness that, embrace them, engage them, and whatever happens in the journey, engagement is really valuable, and getting people optimistic is valuable." So yeah.
Dom, and so I think you brought up a really good point where you met some folks, within, again, that community, and would love for you to maybe parlay, that experience is obviously very different than what you have in the US. And thinking about other unions, how do you see proof of workforce here going forward? Really, again, how are you all going to get involved? Do you guys have, again, you focus probably within your local network, but would love to hear how you envision this really impacting other unions beyond, maybe the firefighter union, or again, other unions that you're working with in the future, how it might even expand to other, community groups that ultimately can benefit from the powers of, non-debasable money.
Okay, so let's look at the landscape for unions let's just look at unions for the next 40, 50 years. Shout out to my guys at Blue Collar Bitcoin. I miss them. But they had a great post a while back about how unions are going to enter somewhat of a golden era as we kind of transition to things like automation, AI, robotics. Real manual labor is in high demand. Quality labor is going to be in high demand for quite some time. Eventually and potentially, that will flip on itself to where manual labor in certain industries are no longer needed. You think about things like truck driving, right? If in 50 years there's manual truck drivers needed, then technology, I guess, has somewhat failed. I don't know, but I mean, I see Waymos driving all the time with no driver in there, so we're already there. Whether it's postal workers, whether it's assembly line folks that are working in plants, there's certain industries that are going to have a lot of issues. But in the meantime, they have this amazing position where there's tons of new unions sprouting up. People see the power in collective bargaining because they're all held hostage by inflation. And as much as you hate the longshoreman guy who's like, "Yeah, my boys ain't going back to work and I got my mansion over with the yacht," like, he got his boys that raise, and they and as much as you slam them for going like, "Hey, they got this raise that was too much," the people that are smart money know that real inflation as a measurement of money supply, they just kept up. If you're getting something like a 5-year raise for 30%, you ain't getting a massive raise. You're keeping up and not taking a cut. The folks that are taking a 222 on a 3-year contract, you're taking a pay cut. Sorry to tell you, both in conservative inflation metrics and in true inflation. So unions have this great position. Bitcoin is a tool that I think has the ability to do more for a worker wage earner than any other entity ever created in the history of the world. So if these two can join up and they can find this tool to preserve their purchasing power, I think you could have a situation where unions, many are 100+ year organizations, have the ability to live on beyond the value of their labor, which may get phased out per industry. So that's really important, number one. As for proof of workforce, we're trying to bring together folks that are finding this tool and empower them and help them, teach other people and help them find the tool. So, I got a Substack that I do a newsletter just for members of unions that have gotten off of zero with their unions. And I give them like information that I think might be helpful. Some of it as simple as like ways to avoid scams or phishing attacks, just things to help them navigate the journey so they, can be successful. We have a YouTube channel now with Proof of Workforce where we're documenting some of our work abroad. We do a little segment, me and Chris Alamo, called Rank and File Bitcoin. We're still figuring the name on that. Not many people know Rank and File. They're like, what is that, like a nail salon thing? Like, rank. And then we're going to do like some special segments. So we're doing that. Eventually for Proof of Workforce, any union that gets off zero, I allow their whole union to be a no-cost member of our organization. So really, for Proof of Workforce, we will eventually become somewhat of a union ourselves, a Bitcoin union of types that consist of members that are workers and wage earners that hold Bitcoin and believe in its value. And with that will come the need to advocate for those folks. But also there'll be a lot of safety and security in the network, right? Because if you can fast forward to whatever may come down the pipe for Bitcoin, whether it be, things with custody, laws and regulations, God forbid, confiscations, security model threats, hard fork, stuff like that, we will continue to represent a large swath of everyday worker wage earners who are, safely and conservatively building their future in Bitcoin, and they're going to care about what that means. And there is strength in numbers, and there is, power in solidarity. And so I hope to be a force for good in like the defense of Bitcoin and its standards in the future as we get more people involved with our movement and our efforts.
I want to ask you a bit of a topical question related to the fires in LA. And you kind of touched on it with your trip to Africa in that, hey, we're not funded very well. We have problems that are much more important than Bitcoin. I'm sure you're going to receive some pushback in the coming months as you continue to push for Bitcoin, saying, hey, we've got a lot to deal with in the Palisades and Altadena. And I was there recently, so I saw it with my own eyes, just the mass of force that's there right now, just worried about, the current issues. So how do you see yourself continuing to advocate for Bitcoin specifically in LA?
Yeah. So if I understand your question right, you're saying like making Bitcoin a priority while other more pressing issues come up and how we're going to advocate that, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, hey, I worked the fires, I won't say too much about it because there's going to be a whole pending report, and I want to make sure I pay a tremendous amount of respect to whatever agencies are doing their investigative reports. So I won't give too much of like my experience there. But obviously major event that does present an issue because I was working on things prior to the fires. And like you said, it's tough to go, hey, assembly member, we got this Bitcoin thing. And he's like, dude, I got people that have no house, no place to live. And like, I'll get back to you. But the thing is when you're a leader for an entire district or a community or state, you can't drop meaningful work just because of calamity. You have to definitely take care of the important things, but that's why you delegate. And so we're trying to continue that meaningful work. I think things are looking much better now. Obviously the fires are contained, but it was, a crazy experience there. And so as other pressing issues occur, that's where it's important for us to educate folks to say, listen, this may not seem like important work at the time, but I promise you, if you take a time machine to 10 years from now and look back, it will seem a whole lot more relevant and important. We're not asking you to sign on to that right now, but support our work and we'll make sure that we have your interest and navigate any career risk. But we have to continue to make forward progress here and continue to work. Otherwise, certain folks are going to be left behind. I was just on a panel in El Salvador for Plan B with Samson Mao, Ambassador Mayorga to the U.S. from El Salvador, Santa Monica Mayor Lana Negretti, and Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim. And it was called the Global Race to Accumulate Bitcoin. And one of the things that was interesting, we talk about why it's important to get Bitcoin, but what does a city look like in 20 years that doesn't embrace Bitcoin? I think they miss out on a ton of important steps, and they're going to be playing catch up and even worse, potentially facing really tough financial decisions and challenges ahead. And so, we just navigate the issues, and we do realize there's bigger stuff, especially when folks don't really understand Bitcoin. It's hard to push that as a priority, but that's okay. We're comfortable working in the background as long as we're making forward progress, a couple yards at a time.
And Dom, so my background is I used to work as an institutional investment consultant before joining Acropolis to work on Bitcoin full time. And I was the investment consultant to a number of pension schemes. And I wondered, because all of you union members will also have a pension fund, right? Have you thought about or done any work towards kind of getting those union members to advocate for an allocation to Bitcoin within their pension fund?
Yeah, we have some open source resources on our website, which is proofofworkforce.org. We drafted like an open letter of interest that folks can just copy and paste and throw to their pension. I've talked with many pensions, and one of the things I always bring up is, hey, like, you guys should look at this and at least have a pro forma on the balance on the books, because your members are looking into Bitcoin. Whatever you think or don't think, they're getting involved. And if you're a pension fund and you're going to tell me, an uneducated, as far as finance is concerned, firefighter who's managed to secure and protect his purchasing power and wealth and build upon that I need to retire 5 years later because you don't know how to manage money, I got a problem with that. And I'm not going to be the only one with a problem with that. There's going to be other folks that are going to be like, time out. This is out of control, because me and my neighbors, everyone is doing well with Bitcoin. And you're telling me you guys are rolling the dice with private equity, playing Wall Street games, getting dunked on. And now you want me to retire 5 years later because you can't balance the books and be, well funded. That's when you're going to get people that are going to step in and go, you're gone. We need to take back our pensions because these people can't figure it out. So if I'm a pension fund, even if I see a ton of career risk and maybe we're not ready yet, when they come for me, I at least want to hold up the thing saying, guys, hold on. We looked at Bitcoin. We at least looked at it. We ran some portfolio, some modeling. We didn't do it, but like we looked at it. Let's look again, because as the financial landscape changes, and as vehicles need to be faster to keep up with this runaway train of money supply, they're going to have to figure it out. And if they don't, they're going to get left behind. And it's only a matter of time before the next financial crisis, whatever happens. And where's the easiest place to take money? Hey, I hope you guys had fun from '08 catching up finally to like a 92% funded status. We'll take some of those assets and reallocate and liquidate here, and we get an advantageous position here, and you'll fall back to 60%. Push the retirement ages back another 5 years. They don't care. We live longer anyways now. Let them retire later. We'll have them contribute more money into the fund, and don't worry. But one day, those workers will say, no, we're out. I'm not going to work from, where I was going to retire 60 to now 67. I'm not going to do it. The answer is no. So, with having experience in the space, I get it. There's a ton of career risk. There's a lot of complexities, but they have to take a look. They're crazy not to take a look.
Yeah, well, if you ever need a volunteer for one of those discussions, give me a call. I'll help you out, man, because I talk the language, so maybe can help you sway it one way or another. Yeah,
I can always use backup, because some of them, I get it. I'm just a punk firefighter grunt, and they're like, this guy don't know anything about. I do know some stuff about Bitcoin, and I am learning more about. I've learned a ton about pensions, and Bitcoin's taught me a ton about macroeconomics and money, like it has for many of us. I remember I was in a conversation with a pension fund, and some of them aren't that educated on Bitcoin, and I'll hear it in some of the punchlines. You'll hear someone say like, this was a good one. They go, we're not so convinced about Bitcoin, but we do believe in the potential of blockchain. And I'm like, that's interesting, because prior to Bitcoin, blockchain could only be found in a few very obscure research papers by, Haber and Stornetta, and no one was talking about blockchain. So you're a believer in blockchain because Bitcoin actually put it to use in the real world in the most successful use case ever to date. So my message to them is like, cool, if you want to be, doubtful on Bitcoin, but pro blockchain, you better have a very good understanding of the tool that made blockchain a reality. I always use the example of like, it's like people saying, yeah, I'm not really sold on the airplane, but I do believe in flight. I think flight is the concept of flight is a really powerful thing. But the airplane, I'm not a believer. I don't think it'll be successful. I don't think there's much value to that. Folks got to do a little bit more research. But like Glenn, I do try not to rag too much because they have a lot on their plate and they have tons of different areas that they have to be educated on. And I get it. Like there will come a day maybe where I'm super knowledgeable on Bitcoin and someone will bring something to me and I'll go, I read some article that this thing was bullshit. I'm going to stick to my thing, Bitcoin, that I know very well. And so it's all just keeping an open mind and getting them like to really look into it.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin taught me more than most things in my life. So I totally relate.
Yeah. Bitcoin's the reason I got a degree in finance is because I learned about Bitcoin. Jamie Dimon, Larry Fink, Warren Buffett, they all said it was rat poison, scam, Ponzi, all the words.
You get a master's in finance in a way, or maybe not a master's, maybe a bachelor's, but you definitely get, if you're reading 20 to 40 books on Bitcoin, people have done a lot of good research and you're definitely getting a solid foundation of the financial system. And Bitcoin does that in such a beautiful way because it's contrast is a very good educational tool. If you can use contrast, it really drives points home to see things that are different and it's really pronounced so that you can hone in and see some of these. The legacy system is made to be complex and obscure. It's like in The Big Short, right? Remember Margot Robbie's in the bathtub and she goes, if it sounds boring, it's because it's supposed to sound boring, and you're supposed to be confused about what a CDO squared is. Bitcoin is very direct, and yes, it's complex, but it's very, like, once you grasp it, it's fixed. There's no obscure BS and there's no layers. It is what it is. There's 9 pages called the white paper and it lays out what Bitcoin is. And when you use that as a tool to measure against this complex, convoluted system, you can pick out the parts that are bullshit and convoluted. And so that's why it's such a great tool.
Couldn't agree more. It's like all the things that just didn't add up for me. The things that didn't add up for me, working in finance, having studied finance for so long or whatever, learning about Bitcoin cleared all that stuff up. So it's a prism, it's a lens.
The impact that I've seen on organizations getting off zero amongst the membership, it cannot be overstated. And I've seen members where their union has, gotten Bitcoin on the balance sheet and they're coming in talking about, hey, why was I always told to pay my house down so fast? I was looking at this and I have a 2.75% interest rate, which means I have cheap money. Why am I paying good money on this loan when in the future that money will be less valuable? Why am I doing this? And you go, wow, yeah, why are you doing that? Oh, I don't know. It's just what I was always told, have your house paid off. And you're like, well, you realize even with a high yield CD, you could outperform your interest rate and simply accumulate money. And then that money is going to be cheaper in the future. So it's really, really powerful like that. And for organizations, that's why I think some of our work is really important. And anyone working with organizations or institutions is because you don't just orange pill the union. You don't just orange pill the pension. I guarantee you Wisconsin pension participants, after they added Bitcoin to their balance sheet, are looking into Bitcoin and finding Bitcoin themselves. And that bleeds over into their lives and has tons of amazing value beyond just the asset appreciation.
Well, we're at the top of the hour. Really appreciate you coming on, Dom. Tell the listeners where they can find you on socials, as well as Proof of Workforce.
Yeah, so my personal X account is Baywatch1. That's BEIWATCH1. Long story. I'll wait for the next time on that nickname, but it has nothing to do with the show or David Hasselhoff. The Proof of Workforce is Workforce BTC on X. We have our new YouTube channel. Any like support, we always say at the top of the show, high signal over subs. But guys, we need the subs and to spread the word. So that's on YouTube at Proof of Workforce. We'll have tons of good content coming there. I got a Substack that I try to update regularly. Our website, proofofworkforce.org. You can find us, but X, you can pretty much find everything because we're posting there. So, and then anyone, a listener, if you're ever wanting to bring Bitcoin to your organization, to your city, to your pension, we're always a direct message or phone call away. And this is work that I love and care about. So until the work exceeds our capacity, which we're getting there, I'll always handle every call personally and do whatever I can to make sure someone bringing an initiative to their organization is as successful as possible.
Yeah, super inspiring, man. And if there's anything we can do to support the work you're doing, any stage, just let us know. We'd be happy to help there. Yeah.
For sure. Well, great to see you guys doing work in the space, and I'll continue looking into and learning about Acropolis. And thank you guys for having me. It's really great to talk shop. Tons of good convo points, and look forward to doing it again soon.
Cheers, man. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the show. Quick reminder that New Foundations is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing should be construed as investment, financial, or legal advice. Business owners, business operators, and those who are Bitcoin curious, let's connect. Visit acropolistreasury.com to learn more or to get in touch with our team.